DJ Anubis.
And DJ Neko.
Back with another video. This time we're going to talk a little bit about the government and Roe versus Wade. We did a little bit of a discussion on our latest podcast, which comes out next week. So you'll hear reports. We'll probably be repeating ourselves a little bit with some of that, but we felt that this deserved a little bit more of a longer time of topic choice, because like on the podcast we can only talk so long.
I know I still took like 20 minutes and I really don't care.
But no, that's fine.
But
she had a lot more to say.
I always have more to say. I mean, if you didn't hear, on Friday the 24th, I believe, Roe versus Wade was overturned, and I'm sure everybody in America has heard now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, and it's unprecedented by the Supreme Court to ever do something like this. This is like,
this is something that's been around for like 50 years,
since 1973, and they usually don't do that. Now, as I spoke with DJ Anubis off air, I've said, I don't agree with it, because it's just heartbreaking that you're thinking now this is going to go down a bad path. But I understand, like, some of these strict constructionalists, these people who follow the Constitution to a T, I understand, like, their mentality. Like, I understand where they came up with the idea to do this. Not saying I agree with it. I can follow their line of thinking. This is a tough one because it's not just legal, it's also morality. And everybody's throwing so many different things at it, like religious reasons, health reasons. Anybody who has any person has an opinion on this. I mean, we're seeing some people are just like, they're changing their profile picture to Handmaid's Tale, and they're like, oh, look what's happening. And, to a point, it may not be, I don't want to say that far off, because I don't know. I can't predict the future, but never has the Supreme Court gone back on one of its own decisions. And since it's not like a constitutional amendment that has been put in saying that, abortion is legal in all states kind of thing, they're now kind of putting it into the hands of the states, letting them make the decision, and putting it back into the hands of the constituents to like vote on things and make the decision. Meanwhile, there were, I think, 4 states that had their pens raised as soon as it was overturned. And the minute it was overturned, abortions were banned in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Missouri, and it was already prohibited in Oklahoma. Not illegal, but prohibited. So now they're banned in all of these states.
Yeah, and I've had discussions with some conservatives on social media and forums and stuff, and some of them are pretty reasonable in terms of they think the total bans are not good or not justified. Like I was having discussions today about this because it's a hot topic, and my concern is, of course, with these total bans is in some of these states, even though it's only like a handful right now, even if you're raped or if it's from incest or something else, like that does not mean you won't be able to get an abortion from that. So
no, when they say total ban, like if you are a woman carrying a baby and it's to the point where it's medically hurting the baby during the pregnancy or it's banned. You're going to have to go out of state to get it done. There are no more, like, the abortion clinics, a lot of them were shut down. A lot of the Planned Parenthoods too. Everybody looks at Planned Parenthood and said it's just like an abortion farm, and it's really not.
Well, we talked about that though, with how much money they make off abortions. So, I mean, the problem right now is, one, we have to worry about any kind of misinformation that's out there. We have to be careful because we know mainstream media, for whatever the source,
they want to push at your hot buttons.
They're gonna push
your
whatever,
emotions going.
They're gonna push whatever agenda they're gonna have. So you have to be careful of what you're taking in. And so, like, if I look at a an article about Planned Parenthood, I had to make sure that those stats and everything are
Make
correct.
sure you want to kind of get like a middle lying publication so that you understand that, okay, they're not leaning too liberal or leaning too conservative, so that you really are like, okay, because statistics can be manipulated to your advantage. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, altogether, it looks like abortion is likely to become illegal or severely restricted in at least 20 states. Now, the sad thing is...
and it just jumped because it was 13. Now we're close to 20.
On the other hand, too, it says 21 states, it's going to remain protected. We're lucky in Maryland because there's already a legal precedent law on our books that Maryland mirrored Roe versus Wade back in 1973 and put the law on our books years ago. 11 states are actively expanding the scope of access, making appointments easier, and then places like California and New York aim to be safe havens. Maryland is kind of like going behind them as well, because during the I don't know the judgment, when they were reading the judgment about Roe versus Wade, they did specifically say abortion is not illegal. And they're allowing the states to make their decisions. So they're not, and I didn't know this. I think when we were talking on the podcast, it won't be illegal to go across state borders. So, I'm reading up, we'll call this the aftermath episode today, because I'm reading up a little bit more on it, that they don't want women to be punished if they are seeking an abortion out of state, if they're living in one of the states where it's now banned. They're not using the word illegal, they're using the word banned, because they're choosing in that state to not perform abortions. Well, I was getting ready to say it. The sad thing, though, is, the stock market has been really bad, but after this announcement, it's up. I mean, this is the first time. It says the first winning week of this month that stocks have went up.
So what is that supposed to represent?
I don't know, but people who are investing a lot of time, like last week when they were getting ready to announce the points being, the inflation points being raised, or the interest being raised, it had an effect on the stock market. Anytime a major decision happens, it affects the stock market, and for whatever reason, the stock market is up. It hasn't been up in a month. And now, so either people are...
But the conservatives are going to take credit for that.
And that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, this helped the economy.
Right.
And I honestly, like, when it comes to fiscal matters, I believe a lot of things that the conservatives do, with, really meaningful taxes, like don't tax for no reason. Don't make ridiculous, like, grain taxes, soda taxes, just taxes need to be meaningful. I lean towards that. But when it comes to, social issues and, let's just say it, body autonomy, I am much more liberal, because, like, I don't trust the government to make decisions for me medically. And now that's what's happening. And basically, we're hearing that, we knew this was coming, because they basically leaked about a month ago the draft of this decision. And, it looks like about 70% of Americans really didn't want this to go away. The Supreme Court is in the minority, but what their reasoning for even opening this back up is because they felt like this was not, it was not something that should be going to the Supreme Court. Basically,
there's conflicting opinions on that, only because not so much the Supreme Court, but just in terms of, like, some people argue it should be a state issue, others argue it should be a federal issue. Some people say that we should have one national blanket, standard on abortion, so that we're consistent. So it's really weird. Then even when I talked to certain people, like I got into a debate with one guy about another conservative said, well, we shouldn't have abortions used as birth control. I hate that term because I think it's so fucking stupid. But when I asked this person to give me the parameters of what to consider using as for birth control, the one answer another person gave was if the
like repeat visitors.
No, they didn't even go down that road. They just said if a woman is in distress, like if she won't survive it, or rape and incest. And
so they think that shouldn't be.
They think that that's the only way. That's the only reasons for an abortion. Those three things. Now, granted, one of the conditions is that, or contentions is that people use abortion as a means of birth control. So for me, that's how I looked at it. The way you said, like, if a woman who isn't using common sense or is being ignorant to not using birth control is going back every 4 to 6 months to get an abortion because she's not using common sense. That to me is abusing.
And that's in the minority.
Right.
It's been proven that it is in the minority.
Right. So, but these conservative guys, they think that it only should matter for in these cases. But I said, well, what about if a teen gets pregnant by accident, or if you have a career woman who is using birth control but doesn't work? Your sister got pregnant on birth control.
Mm-hmm. She was on birth control.
Now, she had the kid, but the reality is there's some women out there.
But she had the choice.
Right.
Now there are people who don't have that choice.
Right.
She was on birth control, and she didn't even know she was pregnant until she was going to her yearly checkup. And they're like, hey, when was the last time you had your cycle? And she said last month. She was still having her cycle, which happens sometimes in pregnancy, especially because she was still taking the birth control pill. And then they said, well, we're going to do a pregnancy test on her. And my sister, shocked, 21 years old, not like she was a teenager, but still 21, not ready to be a mother. She's just starting her life. She was in college. She was trying to get into nursing school. And that derailed her entire plans because she had to be a mother and was not able to go to school and work and take care of a baby. And, it just wasn't happening. And they had to move because they were in a small, like 1-bedroom apartment. They had to find a place to live. It derailed her life. Now, she chose to have the baby, and she was already, I think, 4 months pregnant, which in Maryland, it would have still been legal to have an abortion, but she chose not to. She was like, it happened. It sucked. But there are women who, now you're not going to be allowed to have that choice. You get pregnant and you don't have a choice. We are not just baby making machines, women. That's kind of like what this decision makes me feel like.
I hate that they have made abortion such a black and white topic because there's so many variables to this. Mm-hmm. And like I said, a woman who's got a career going, they don't always get the luxury of having leave for birth. So or
you do take the leave,
and then you come back and you don't have the job anymore.
Or you're just like squashed down. My sister was very lucky because where she was working, she was allowed to take off a year. Didn't get paid the whole time, but she was able to take off a year and then go back to work when her oldest was a year old and still had her job.
Yeah, a lot of times they come back and say, well, you knew the risk when you had sex. I'm like, well, I know the risk when I walk across the street. We're not banning buses or cars.
Yeah, right. I know the risk every time I get into a plane and travel.
Yeah, right. So, it's kind of a weak argument to go with. Now, the other thing another person brought up was, and he wasn't really coming from an asshole-ish position, but he's like, one thing that frustrates me is that when a woman gets pregnant, the man doesn't really have a say for what the woman's going to do with the kid. And I really just told him, I said, unfortunately, this is one of those things where it's going to be an unfair thing for men. Like, we're just going to have to bite the bullet on that, because if we start trying to determine what a woman does with her body and the baby, then that now means that we're calling ownership of their body. We can't do that. That's one of the underlying issues of abortion right now, is that we continue to try to play God with women's bodies as if we own them.
It would almost be like I had to have a hysterectomy. It's been 4 years now, and over 4 years. And it wasn't, so I was given two choices. I could have a hysterectomy, or I could have another surgery that would save my uterus. And the doctor was very good. Trust me, I was 1 day hysterectomy. I had major organs coming out of me, and I was able to leave the hospital. It wasn't even an overnight stay. So he's a very good surgeon. But he told me the hysterectomy is an easier surgery for me to perform. And I was, I think, 37 at the time. So he's like, but if you are thinking about having children, the other surgery is a lot harder to perform because I had tumors in my uterus. He said, I can do it. It's a longer, harder surgery, a little bit more painful recovery for this surgery. But if you're thinking about having children, that's the only way you can preserve your uterus. And it would be like if he had the choice and said, listen, we're going to have kids eventually, even though she is already 37 and, you know, now considered a high, this is the other thing too, when you hit a certain age, 35 and older, you're considered a high risk pregnancy. So if I made the decision, I said, you know what, we haven't gotten pregnant yet. It's not going to happen. I want the easier surgery. I want the surgery where I don't need to be laid up for multiple days. And I really only needed like 2 days of rest. Then I was going back to my normal, and I was teaching dance. The only thing they told me was no heavy lifting. Like I couldn't, like I taught little kids, no high kicking, no heavy lifting or splits or anything. Because most of my stitches were internal. I couldn't even really see my stitches, but they were internal. No picking up, because I taught babies, no picking up the babies. I had assistants who helped me with that. But if they would have went to him and said, what would you want for your wife? Do you want her to have the hysterectomy, or do you want her to have the myomectomy where we remove the tumors but preserve the uterus? And mind you, even if I had that surgery where the tumors were removed, they would come back.
That's an important thing, because if we're going to say, and I know, like, again, this guy on the forum, he wasn't really pushing that hard on because he understood the complications, how messy it is in terms of how men feel about having kids and stuff. But if you're opening that door, it's just leading to more problems.
It's leading to other things like this. It would be like he has the decision
to
make about.
That's not the right thing to do, because
I mean, he was like, whatever you want to do, and I'm like, I want the easiest way out of all this pain. And the doctor was like, this will be easy peasy. He said, basically, there's a small chance that we go in there and we see that it's worse than it is, and we might have to do the full cut you open and take everything out. Didn't happen. It was all laparoscopic, and I healed beautifully after about 3 months. You know, no big deal at all. And
I mean, I get it. Like, once you get intimate with someone, it's consensual and everything. And, you know, together you've made the conscious decision to have sex. It's a two-party thing. But once the woman conceives, it's a whole other ballgame, because now you're both not carrying this kid. Only one person is. And so she's taking all the health risks. She's the one that has to deal with all the labor and everything else.
I mean, women get
so at that
preeclampsia, they get diabetes while they're carrying baby. This is only during pregnancy too. They'll get. I know that some ladies that I know who have had children, their pregnancy is so high risk that they've had to have emergency C-sections earlier than expected. Having a baby and being pregnant, you know, every pregnancy is different too, especially friends of mine who've had many children. A good friend of mine, her first pregnancy and her first delivery were traumatizing, to say the least. Like, everything was bad. The pregnancy was bad. She was on bed rest. The delivery was bad. She was, you know, stitched up, and it was awful. She wanted to have more kids, but she was too scared because it was so bad. And then when she hit about 30, her doctor was like, listen, you know, because you're high risk and because you had a high risk pregnancy before, it might be good to have a kid now instead of waiting until. And she had her second, and her second pregnancy and delivery was just like, completely different, way chiller. Everything was planned and happened when it needed to happen. She didn't have go through everything she did with her first. I think sometimes people don't realize how hard pregnancy is on the body. And if something is going wrong, it's not an easy decision to say, I need to terminate this pregnancy.
Well, most conservatives are on board with the whole, the woman's health is at risk. But again, if you're only limiting your scope to rape, incest, or the woman's health, then you're not really being fair, because there's not every case is the same. And like we said, there's extreme positions on both ends of the spectrum. So the left, or I should say the right first, we're worried about them wanting to take away birth control altogether. So now you're like,
well,
you're overstepping.
I'm gonna get into that in a minute,
but the other side of that is there are people on the left who think it's okay to have late-term abortions, and that's what the conservatives are pissed off about, because it comes down to when we think a fetus has actually become a child. So at what point we have to determine when that happens. And most times, I think, what is the actual thing we've been using?
It's the third trimester.
So how many weeks is that? Like, I'm playing dumb here because I don't know all this.
Like after 6 months, because your pregnancy is 9 months, so it's after 6 months.
So the 5 to 6 months is the safe period that we were using.
Well, it was 6 months and prior. You could do it. Right. So first trimester, second trimester. When you hit the third trimester, I know somebody personally who had to have an emergency C-section, and they were in that third trimester, like right on the line, like around 7 months.
But that was a hazardous to their health.
Right? It was hazardous to her health, and she was carrying this baby, and she wanted to have this baby, and the baby was in the NICU for many months, but he grew up and he's in middle school now and he's doing great. But the first couple of years of his life were really hard because he was so premature. She didn't abort the baby. She went and had him and went into hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical debt to take.
That's the worst thing.
Yeah. She ended up filing for bankruptcy, so that she's like, there's no way I can pay a $200,000 hospital bill. And, sometimes she clearly loves her children, clearly is happy being a mother, but she's like, I had to swallow my pride, file for bankruptcy. There's no way I can pay this bill, which goes into another thing with our health care system and everything. But that's why conservatives are saying, like, yeah, I even feel that way too. Like when you hit the third trimester, you're talking about,
yeah, I mean, again,
you're really talking about a baby at that point, because he was born in way early and he still survived even with complications at first.
I think it's common sense that once a child is actually starting to fully form in the womb and getting closer to being born, that we can consider that a child.
And he wasn't even fully, like,
but if I've got a kid,
his lungs still needed to be
a fetus, and he's got like a sperm tail and everything like that.
I mean, if it's the size of a grape, it still hasn't. I know a lot of people are like, okay, you can see the heartbeat at 8 weeks, and I get it. I've heard so many, and this is the kind of thing that I guess brings us together as women. I didn't know a lot of these stories until, this came out yesterday, and I'm hearing these stories about women either helping people with abortions because of bad situations, or they themselves had to have abortions, and they're, it's not something that you talk about over cocktails. Like, this is not something that, and these are people I know, people I communicate with, and they're saying, I had to have an abortion because the baby was stillborn, or the baby wasn't going to make it, or the baby, we did genetic testing, and the baby, if it would come to full term, would be lucky to live for, 2-3 years. These are not people who had abortions just because they were using it as birth control. They were not happy to have these abortions, but they needed to because they had to make decisions. One woman I know was in a bad relationship, and she already had children with this person and ended up pregnant, and she was trying to get away from this person. She didn't want a third baby with another, a terrible husband. And a third baby would just mean she's even more trapped. And I know that there's a mutual friend of ours helped her, get that abortion and helped her get away from this abusive relationship she was in. Sometimes abortions are really not planned. I mean, what I'm seeing from my friends is they're really not planned. It's just, you have to make that decision. Do I bring a child into this world for the one reason? He's going to be severely handicapped and maybe will live for a couple of years if they're lucky. Or two, I bring a child into this world. I'm not really even sure, because this was a very early term abortion. I'm not even really sure if it's healthy or not, but I'm already in a really bad situation for me and my kids. And if I bring another child into this situation, it's going to be worse. Bad, abusive. I'm not talking about, oh, I'm just not happy. Like bad, abusive, taking advantage of her, not good situation.
Yeah, I get, a little bit irritated when they keep saying it's such an easy thing to solve. I'm like, no, it's not, because in some cases, and we talked about this on the podcast, like some of this is based off of their religious faith. And I'm like, you brought up a good point. There should be a separation of church and state. So the faith part of it shouldn't even be a factor in any of this. It should not be. There's a reason we have a separation of church and state. So I get kind of pissed off whenever that keeps getting brought up. Oh, well,
you're protecting the unborn baby's rights. Well,
right.
What about the mother's rights? What about you can't? When you start saying like, one has more rights than the other, that's just because of your religion.
Well, one of their arguments is, and it's kind of funny, they go back and they push against the Democrats because Democrats are against like executions for rapists or pedophiles or whoever. And you and I, we're okay with the executions. We have no problem with that. So as libertarians, we're fine. We're down the middle. We see it both sides. But that's a common argument. It's like, well, you're okay with this, but then babies getting killed. But then again, you and I, we kind of determine child being after the third trimester. So like anything before that, we don't even consider a kid. So for us, it's not that complicated, but it's not as simple as people want to make it out to be. Because when you tell me that, abortion should only be for women who are in danger of dying or rape or incest, that's your three that you point out.
And some of these states
that's very short-sighted.
Yeah, and some of these states are still saying, even in the cases of rape or incest,
right,
it's banned. The only way that you could medically ask for an abortion is if it is a medical emergency, not even the possibility of an emergency, but in a medical emergency. That's the only time that they would perform an abortion. Not an emergency for the child, not the fact that if you bring a child and you already knew that this child, you will bear this child and probably will die within, minutes or maybe a year. And I respect people's opinions on that, because I've also read some stories of friends who are on the other side, and they basically said, I knew I was taking a chance carrying this baby full term, and I did it, and I knew we wouldn't have much time with the baby, and they did. The baby died within days of having. And this is what I mean. Like, I'm seeing all these stories just come pouring out from women, and they're kind of giving both sides of their perspective, like why I chose an abortion and why I didn't choose an abortion. And for me, this just proves you don't want the government to have medical autonomy over you. It should be a personal decision. This woman here, she knew that her kid was possibly going to die, but she still had so much faith that maybe the baby would come out, and maybe the baby would survive, and maybe everything would be okay. And then, this other woman who got the genetic testing and realized that if she carried the baby to full term, there would be like a 2% chance of the baby surviving more than a year. It should be in the woman's hands, and you're taking it away from them.
Well, some people are okay with that, but they do want limits. So I know, like, I'm just going to spout his name out, Davey, who runs Broncos forums.
Mhm.
He's very logical. He's a conservative, and he's very, he's compromised a lot of what he's discussed about this case. And, it's fair to say that he's a person of the faith, and, he is pro-life, but then he also understands that abortion is necessary, but that there needs to be limits. So he's totally against the bans, obviously, but as you said, like, a woman should have her say, but then, like, can we have that? Plus, if it gets a third trimester, unless it's detrimental to the woman, do we have a limit that says you can't have an abortion? Like, do we just say no? Are you okay with that as a woman?
Well, from what I understand, when you're hitting a third trimester abortion, you're basically having a dead baby. And it's a baby, like it's like the size of this.
Well, let's say the baby's healthy though, and they still want an abortion at that point.
Well, that's the problem. Like me personally, no. If I was pregnant, I found out. If I went 6 months, had no idea I was pregnant, and I found out, my personal opinion would be like, this is my fucking baby, obviously, because I wasn't planning on it, and I did not have morning sickness. I did not have any problems. Everything was A-okay. And now I'm pregnant. It's my baby. I couldn't, because what they do during third trimester abortions is actually horrifying. And that's what the conservatives are using to kind of like propel this abortion, what's the right word? They're using those examples.
Right. I get it. It's like a small portion of that they're using as a platform.
So thank you. A lot of people don't seek out third term abortions just because they want to terminate a baby because of.
But my question to you was, though, if we're going to compromise on this, so let's say they make abortion legal again, but that there's got to be these limits on these third trimesters. Are you okay as a woman? Obviously you can't speak for every woman in the world, but would you be okay with it if they said, look, if a woman is in her third trimester and the baby's healthy and she's healthy and there's no danger, if she wants to get an abortion, it's okay for the government to say no?
I hate that.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, because that's sort of the hang up. We need to find compromises in this whole thing.
This is my problem. I hate like the government having any kind of say because it's my body.
But it's only that portion. I'm not saying it's for everything.
Oh, I know. But in order to do a third trimester abortion, you're basically having a stillborn baby. It's a lot different than doing an abortion early on. The third trimester abortion.
But how much of that percentage is stillborn? Like, do we have?
No. They kill the baby, and
okay.
That you're having, or they're sucking it out and chopping it up.
Okay, yeah, the little barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Shit,
yeah.
Okay.
So that's hard for me, as my heart. I'm like, at that point, I'd be like, fuck yeah, this is. I wouldn't do it. And I've never really thought of myself as a mother, but if I was, I just know what happens during a third trimester abortion.
But you think they should still have that option?
But I do, because I don't know what's right for somebody else. I don't know what's right for somebody else's body. I don't know what's right for somebody else's life.
What about adoption?
Well, this is the problem I have with adoption, because after I had my hysterectomy, I kind of went into a little mental tailspin because, he and I had never really wanted to be parents. And it's a lot different when you have the choice to be parents. When then someone takes your uterus away, you're like, fuck, I don't have any choice now. So I started looking into adoption in many different avenues. And that's one of the conservatives' biggest, like, everybody should open it up for adoption. I think a lot of states have their own kind of control over adoption, and the only reason I say that is because in Maryland, adoption from a baby on is really hard. It's really hard to get a baby. You have to find a pregnant woman, through some kind of networking, which your sister did,
Mm-hmm.
and get that baby adopted. And that's great. It's not easy. And then fostering is even harder because if you're looking to, because me personally, I never really wanted to deal with a baby and diapers. I'd rather have a 3-year-old. Just give me the terrible twos. I want you to be, So I looked into it. I'm like, okay, what if we fostered? How would that work? In Maryland, they like to keep the child with its biological family. So if we fostered a kid, let's say we fostered the kid for 5 years, the kid's now 8.
Yeah, we talked about this where the parents could come back and
they will, if I'm a foster, not an adopted, and then the parents, they retain rights over the child, even if they're in jail. Mm-hmm. So I'm fostering your kid. I'm giving it a good life. And I don't mind doing that because that's what I chose. But as soon as the parents get out of jail or get out of their problem, they're able to just come and claim the kid again. And that is here in Maryland because they want to keep children with their biological family. And it has its pros and cons, because let's just say I do foster your kid for 5 years and I'm a really great mother and I'm really happy to take care of your kid. And let's say you got your shit together and you came out and you're clean now and you've got a house and a job. That's a good thing. But we see a lot more of the negative where it's like it's just a vicious cycle where these people are in and out of rehab or in and out of jail.
Kids become tools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I looked at that, and then I looked at it's actually easier to adopt out of the country, from Russia, from the Philippines, from China, than it is to adopt here in the U.S. So I have done the research, and if anybody is interested in any of it, I could forward you some things. Just to get a kid from overseas, you have to be able to pay for their visa, pay for their passport. You have to go and live in their country for a minimum of 2 weeks. Get them home. You have to prove what kind of house you have. You have to have, same thing with fostering, by the way, because if you foster, that kid has to have its own room. There is no sharing. You have to show you have a good house, and I mean, a lot
solid income.
And a lot of times too with fostering, they will pay you to foster. So that's great.
Well, if I'm fostering anything, it's be kittens. That's it. Dealing with kids, fuck that.
But I looked into all of it because I was kind of a little sad that I had lost my freedom of choice because my body failed me. And I kind of threw it on him. I was like, I've been looking into adoption, and the problem is it's going to cost us like $30,000 to $50,000. The only people who can really adopt are wealthy. I mean, and
Angelina Jolie has like 20 kids, so I mean,
good for her. We can't adopt. I don't have $30,000 to $50,000 to adopt, and this is that's just low, because if you're even talking going to another country and everything, that doesn't include like living there, the plane tickets, the visas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I know everybody is like, oh, have the baby, put it up for adoption. It's not as cut and dry. It's not easy. Adoption is not an easy process for a prospective parent or for the baby itself. I know he is adopted, so he has a soft spot for talking about adoption because he was a baby when he was adopted, and otherwise his teenage, but you were before Roe versus Wade, so otherwise his teenage mother, if she had the choice, could have gotten rid of him. And so I understand when you're like, let's talk about adoption, but you've seen what I've shown you, how hard it is to just be like, you have to get on waiting lists. They come to your house and interview you. If you find,
oh yeah, they probably come down here and say, we're not letting a kid come in this.
They'll be like, look at this house. It's so tiny.
Fucking house of the devil.
Metal. Oh
devil. God.
It doesn't even matter that we are. We both have jobs. We're upstanding citizens. We would totally be, especially if we got a 3-year-old. I don't want a baby. I want a 3-year-old.
Can we just skip to like 18 so he could actually get a job?
I don't want the diapers and the waking up in the middle of the night. That's why
you're going to contribute to this family in my tarantula fund.
But I did. I was like, how about an older child, and it's still not easy, and there's still so many kids who need homes, but they don't make it easy. They don't make it easy for parents. They don't make it easy on the kids. They don't make it easy on the biological parents. You have to literally give up the rights at the time of birth. And I think that's what happened with your biological parents, because if you look at his birth certificate, it doesn't have his biological parents' name on it. It has his adopted parents. And I think the minute he was born, his biological mother gave up her parental rights, like legally. And that's why, like, we have no idea. It's not even on, like, if you go through Ancestry or something, you can't find it. I think too, one of the things that kind of hit me was that this was such a big deal. The Supreme Court never goes back on its decisions, but it kind of opened a door. And now they're saying that, here's a quote: "We should reconsider all of the court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell." The Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, writing in concurring opinion yesterday, suggested that other rights not addressed by the framers of the Constitution, such as same-sex marriage and legal contraceptive, could be revisited by the court.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, some conservatives don't think that they're going to go that far, but when
this is coming from a judge.
When you have Thomas actually mentioning it, that's why people get alarmed, because you can say they might not go there, but if you have someone bringing it up, that means they're thinking about it.
This is coming from a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah,
saying so. And again, if they go against same-sex marriage, I'm not going to agree with it at all. I'm going to be like this, very emotional. But I'm going to understand how it happened, because it is not anything. What this group of new, the 3 new judges, they're very strict constructionalists, and they are defending the Constitution itself. So anything in the Constitution, they feel like, if you're coming to the Supreme Court, unless it's something defending the Constitution, it's no. The answer is no. There is no constitutional right unless the president decides to write some kind of amendment. Maybe the president will write an amendment about abortion, amendment about same-sex marriage, an amendment about birth control. Because you got to realize, birth control has been illegal as recently as the 50s. Illegal. And this includes the pill, not just IUDs, not just in vitro, Norplant. I can't remember what it's called, the stuff that you put under your skin. It was illegal. Like, the handing out a pill for contraceptive, you could go to jail as a doctor. Even though it was around, you could still go to jail. On the flip side, the abortion pill, which you are able to take, I think up to 12 weeks pregnancy, it's approved by the FDA. So technically, it should still be available. So if you use it, you should not be in trouble. Even if you're in a state that bans abortions, the abortion pill is approved by the FDA. So if you have someone prescribe that to you, you should be able to get it. But will that happen? Or will they get pressure, like at pharmacies and stuff, not to fill this prescription just based on whatever the state's rules are? And I think for me, this whole thing boils down to what I just read about other decisions made by the Supreme Court, that now they're going to go back on other decisions. Like, they're just giving a middle finger to the decisions made in the past, including same-sex marriage. Maryland, as shitty, this state is probably one of the worst places you could live. Like, Housing is expensive.
Taxes
suck. Wages are low. Property taxes are off the fucking chain. Like the tiny ass house that we have with the tiny amount of property we have, you could go one state over and have almost a mansion with the same amount of property taxes. Otherwise, though, when it comes to social issues, we're very liberal. There is a very good, it's called WIC, Women, Infants, and Children program. If you are a pregnant woman, you can apply for this, and it will, there's prenatal care, there is formula provided for you. There are many housing programs. A lot of stuff is provided, and that's great. Like that is one of the and we are not going to ban abortions. And we were Holly and Kristen. Oh, I'm sorry, I used their names. Two of my girlfriends got married like 2 days after the same-sex marriage was passed here in Maryland, and they started planning their wedding before like it was even passed. They were just so sure it was going to pass in Maryland because I think the ballot was in November, and then they got married in January. And it was early January too, so early that the place where they got married still had all their Christmas decorations. It was like January 6th or something. So I feel like because Maryland already has these things grandfathered in as laws, these things are not going to hurt us as much as it would like Oklahoma, Mississippi, other Texas, anything I read in this article, any abortion that was on the table for it's off. Like not because they have specifically banned it, but because it's up for discussion again. Are we going to ban it? Are we going to talk about it? I feel like this is kind of the aftermath of the Roe versus Wade. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. And I really hate hearing that our federal government is ready to dissent on their own decisions, because we know that laws are not just made from laws written into, the books. Laws also go through judicial precedent. Like when the Constitution was written, there was no fucking internet. There were no cars. These things have to evolve.
Yep.
And
I say that a lot. I actually say that a lot regarding guns and everything else, is that, and we're gun owners, but like the times have changed. Like we don't really have to worry about, armies coming in here and taking over our city.
Yeah, we'll tell that to the Ukraine.
Well, that's Ukraine. Like they're fucking archaic. Them and Russia.
Not Ukraine is not. They were an established democracy, minding their own fucking business, doing great, and then Russia just tramples in on them.
So you think that we're gonna have a country come into America and try to take it over?
No, because America is bigger than all of
Europe. That's my point. We're not having that. We're not gonna have that problem. But you have to change with the times. You have to evolve. You have to adapt. And so, like, unfortunately, a lot of conservatives, like, they just clutch their pearls and they get all worried about my guns. I gotta have my guns. You can't take my fucking guns.
But the guns are the Second Amendment. It's
I know.
written.
I get that.
And that's why guns get more.
But I don't need a fucking Gatling gun. I mean,
I would like a potato launcher gun. But
a what?
There's potato. But the reason, and I hear this from a lot of people too, they're more, America's more worried about their guns and their women and their babies. But again, not that I agree with any of this. I like having guns and I like having that right. But because it's written into the Constitution, it's much harder to ban guns. Now, granted, I'm sure we banned slavery, so you can ban things. You can add it to the Constitution.
Well, they just banned fucking abortion. So there you go.
But they didn't ban it in the Constitution.
Right.
They took away that decision, so it's judicial. Meaning, a lot of when you have a lawsuit or you're trying to prepare your legal argument, you can look at statutes, you can look at like laws, but you can also look at judicial decisions, and you can present that as your argument and say, hey, based on this judicial decision made by this judge, I'm having a similar problem. You should rule in my favor. It's not uncommon to say, like, we're making decisions based on what judges have decided. Because think about the first fucking car and the first fucking car accident, or the first time a car ran over a person. There's nothing in the Constitution about that, but you have to look at what, moving forward, how we're going to deal with it. And funny about that is that's how jaywalking was invented. Jaywalking was invented by the car manufacturers because they're like, oh,
they weren't at a crosswalk,
mm-hmm.
so
that's how it started. They're like, oh, you're jaywalking, that's why we hit you.
Well, here again, we're gonna wrap this up, but
how long have I been talking?
That's fine, but right now there's a war brewing in America in government. So we've got the Democrats and Republicans going at it. They're still dealing with all the Trump shit from January 6th. And the problem that we're running into as Americans is that us as Americans are getting lost in the riffraff of what's going on up there in Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. And right now there doesn't seem to be a real end in sight. Like, we have Roe versus Wade now being overturned. The gun issue is still an issue that's still going on about schools and everything else. Trump is still in the media when he shouldn't be. Biden's not really doing a good job running this country. So the problem is we're having a hard time coming to compromises. And like, as much as the chirping from both sides keeps saying that we need,
like our crickets,
right, saying they need to find some common ground, they're not even attempting to do it. It's just, hey, you did this, we're going to do this. And so there's this never-ending cycle of bullshit that's going on up there that needs to be addressed. Like, and, one of the other topics that's come up because of the whole Trump thing is that, are we going to hold these politicians accountable for when they break the laws? Yes, we should. And if it means going back and getting Hillary or whoever else for the shit they done, we need to do that. Because if we're going to improve our people that we elect and improve the government and get back on track, we've got to start holding these people accountable. We can't have a moment where the FBI comes out and says, well, Hillary did this, but we just saw it as a dumb blonde moment. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't count. It's
not showing accountability.
Right. So if Trump did some shit that is shady,
he needs to be accountable as well. Right. Everybody needs to be accountable.
As long as the evidence is there, bring it. Get him out of there. Put him in jail. I give a rat's ass about Trump. Put him in jail. But we know there's evidence against Hillary, so put her ass there too. She can sit right next to him. They can bitch at each other all day.
My kind of final thoughts on a lot of this are women today, and especially these young women, they have I am not young. I'm 41. But up until the early 70s, women needed a cosigner to get a car, a cosigner to get a credit card, a male cosigner to get a bank account, unless you are wealthy with a trust that your father gave you or an ex-husband gave you because you got divorced. And divorce was usually never in favor of the woman, regardless of if the man was unfaithful and if there are children involved. So it's really unbelievable that today, where we have women who are doctors, lawyers, judges themselves, CEOs, women working in male-oriented, professions, that now we have to start feeling like, okay, are we taking a step back? Is that what's going to happen? I mean, and it's hard for me because like all these women who are alive now who saw this, who saw what they're like, the boomer generation, a lot of them are the most vocal with like, take away abortion. And it blows my mind because you were there when women were not getting paid the same amount of money as men to do the same job. You were there when women were looked over for promotions, and it still happens today. It happens. It's happened to me, where a man with less experience gets a promotion over you because even though you have the experience and I even have a degree, a lot of times what they say is the man is more qualified, even though they're 10 years younger and have zero experience. They're more qualified for whatever reason. It's happened to me. An interesting story that I read from back in the 70s was about this single mother with 2 kids, and she was fighting for herself at her job, saying, I don't have a husband. I need to make as much money as a man makes because I'm providing for my family. And my husband is AWOL. We're divorced. He's not contributing at all. So her company is like, nope, this is what you get. So what does she do? She decides that she is going to be a lineman. If you don't know what that is, that's the people who are up on the poles fixing your power when the power goes out. This is in the 70s, mind you. There are no female linemen. She studied what she needed to do. She went to the library, studied what she needed to do to take the test, and she passed. And she was the first female lineman. And I cannot remember her name right now. So it makes me upset because reading her story.
The first cable splicer.
Not the first one, but I'm the only sailing one.
There you go. That's what I mean.
But she took that, and she is what inspired me to try to be a cable splicer, because this is right after I got passed over a promotion I was supposed to get. This is right after I was, thinking things are going great in all aspects of my job and my life. And it wasn't. It just all came crashing down. And I took something I was interested in, and I talked to all of the guys, and they told me what I needed to do, and I did it. Doing something like taking away abortion from women. I know this is like, it's night and day, but you're taking this and you're pushing us back. What's going to happen? Like, am I not going to be allowed to be a cable splicer anymore? Are you going to restrict more women's rights? Are you going to say like, okay, well now your baby farms. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have a uterus. I can't farm any babies for you.
I just can't wait till we have separate beds. I mean, that's going to be fun.
We can go sleep in the other room. It's actually cooler in there.
Kidding.
It's actually the sidebar. Our bedroom is the furthest away from our air conditioning, and it's a big room, believe it or not. Like, I don't know why they gave the master bedroom in this house, made it so big. I think
you kind of missed my joke.
I know. But
I'm funny.
He's funny.
I am funny. I'm very funny.
The second bedroom, though, upstairs is the coldest fucking room in this house. I don't know why. There have been times where I'm in bed and I'm like, I'm just going to crawl into that room.
Yeah, you took all the covers this morning.
No, you took all the covers.
The fuck I did. I had a piece that I had to try to get over me.
He rolled.
No, I did not.
He rolled over.
I don't roll and grab. You roll and grab.
You rolled and
You did
grabbed.
the crocodile death roll and take everything with you. No.
I had 0 covers, and that's why I grabbed them from him.
You have all the covers. That's the problem. Anyhow.
All right. So I know this was a long one. Please,
well, it had to be discussed.
Please subscribe to our channel. Please like this video, and please give us some comments on what you think.
That like button and share.
Like and share. Honestly,
we appreciate it.
For all of my friends on both sides, I am not.
We love you all.
Yeah.
But quit fucking around with everybody's lives. Like, we got to come together. Compromise.
I really could have an argument for everything that anyone throws at me, because I've been in a lot of these positions. So if you're telling me abortion is bad, adoption is good, I'll have something for that. If you're telling me that, body autonomy should not be granted to women, I have an argument for that. I just really get upset because I never was in that position where I needed to like have an abortion, but it was kind of always there, you know. Not that it's not like I'm like, hey, let's go have an abortion today. It was just always something where I'm like, if something happens and I need it. Now we have at least 20 states that are kind of, I think it was 7, wasn't it? That they've banned it, and then an additional 13 are kind of like on the cusp of banning it.
We can all hope eventually they're going to get wise and rework this shit somehow.
But, I mean, the only way is if the president himself puts something into the Constitution so that these strict constructionalist judges are like, okay, well, now it is in the Constitution, because they can't argue because it's in the Constitution. But apparently, as I'm reading again in my news, they're talking about putting abortion on the ballot, and they want it to be put in the people's hands. So we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's a federal ballot. I mean,
that's the thing. Like,
they're putting it in the state's hands.
It's going to be pushed hard against with the conservatives, because one of the big issues with some of the left is, of course, the Electoral College and how that works. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be like, well, majority of America is leftists, or, you know, people on that side of the fence, or the blue, as they call it. So they're going to say, well, if you put that as on a national ballot, they're going to be like, it's going to be unfair. So they're going to try to argue to do it state by state, obviously.
Well, and that's what they've done right now. Right. They've put it back into the state's hands,
But I think that, and in hopes, if they do that on a national ballot, that conservatives like Davey, I forget how he pronounces it, but if more people like him on the other side of the fence have a compromise, you know, in both ends, you know, Democrats need to be just as easily as compromisable as the right. If we can do that, then we can probably find a pretty good common ground. But it's a matter of people just, you know, getting off or quit digging their heels in the sands and working together, because this really does need to be addressed, and not the way it has been so far, because right now it's kind of out of control.
And it is, because they've already even said we might look at other decisions.
Right.
They've never looked at old decisions, and now they're talking about looking at other decisions. You know,
so stay informed, and as they say, make sure you're talking to your elected leaders, and we make sure we vote for better people to get in there.
Absolutely. Just please. Right now, a lot of people never think that their voice is heard because there's so much shit going on. I connect with our local leaders on Facebook, and they make it very easy. I've actually contacted our local state representatives and asked, like, how can I donate to the Maryland Food Bank? What can I, like, where are things I can do to make a difference? And that's where you need to really start. If you are against this decision, start local and work your way up.
Stay involved.
Stay involved. Honestly, I know everybody thinks that it's a mountain to climb, and it really is. But the more people you have on your side, and the more of your elected leaders who are on your side, it might make a difference.
Thank you all.
Thank you again.
Appreciate you.
Please subscribe, like our video.
If you have any comments, please leave them. We're going to be posting this on social media and some of the forums.
And stay tuned for Hordes of Chaos. Every Wednesday, we put out a new podcast.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Keep it real.